I'll start the recording on this computer.
It doesn't give me the option for YouTube if we're doing Facebook.
Oh, you got to choose one or the other. Facebook's probably the better option right now.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Yeah, everybody's kind of there.
People are slowly trickling in. So we might just need to kind of keep an eye on the cameras for whatever reason. The setting to automatically keep cameras off seems to be hit or miss tonight on Zoom. So just to let everyone know. Okay, well, welcome, Brooke. How are you?
Thank you. I'm good.
Good. I'm doing great. So just to let everybody know that's in the audience, we got Brooke tonight. Super excited to talk with her, get to know her a little bit. For those who are new to the show, we ask that you please keep your cameras off and your microphones off. There may come a point in the show a little bit later where we ask people if they would like to open up their mic or camera or both for questions for Brooke. But for the meantime, we ask that everybody just kind of keep it off. And if you have any questions you'd like, feel free to use the chat feature. We're certainly going to be monitoring that as well. And if you're new to the show, please like us on Facebook and on YouTube, subscribe, and help support the show. We got some interesting guests coming up soon. Some that some of you may have seen on either TV or YouTube or both recently. So that's about as far as I can say at the moment until we have them officially scheduled, but they've agreed. So tonight, Brooke is in the hot seat.
Yes.
Yeah. So Brooke,
Texas girl.
yeah, I always love it when I don't know somebody because it just feels more natural to get to know you, right? Like I'm not kind of trying to ask these questions I already know answers to. So this is great. I don't know you. So start off, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, so I have been a member of the church my whole life. There's 6 kids in the family. I'm number 3, so dead middle child. And I got married at the age of 19. So I grew up mostly in Utah. But I haven't lived in Utah really since I've been married. So we went out to Iowa for school, St. George, and then Texas for work. So I've been in Texas for 10 years.
That's the promised
have 5
land, I hear.
kids. The most, I don't love the scenery of Texas, but I love the people. Like the most people of Texas are amazing.
Yes,
Just
they
the
are.
most,
Texas is good.
yeah,
It might
just the
become the Republic of Texas pretty soon.
I know, seriously.
We're all right with that.
Don't California or Texas. That's
You
That's
guys will
right.
have really
New
cool
motto.
passports. You guys have really cool passports. Yeah.
seriously. So I have 5 kids, 4 boys, and then 1 girl. My oldest is 15, the youngest is 4. So I'm just entering in the age of teenagers, and it's gonna kill me, I feel like.
Oh, it will.
So yeah.
So that's great. So it sounds like you kind of moved all the way around, but you did grow up in Utah, right?
Yes. Yep.
So are you locked down in Texas mainly because of the divorce and so the kids need to be close to their father sort of thing? Is he still there?
No, he's actually in Utah. So
Oh, you just love Texas that much. You stayed.
yes. Well, so when I got divorced, I was living in the DFW area, and I work with my sister who lived in Waco. It's about 2 hours away. And so I ended up moving down with the kids, and then he was going to come, but he didn't end up coming. So he ended up moving to Utah. So he's been in Utah since May. So that's why I'm actually in Utah right now. So he has the kids. And so it's been a challenge. So I'm not stuck to Utah. And I mean, I'm not stuck to Texas, and end up having to move just so my kids can be with their dad. But
You
we'll
just
see.
like Texas.
I do. Yeah.
I mean, what's not to like, really?
It is. It's a great state.
It is a great state, and there is just tons of tarantulas down there all over the state. But don't tell Celeste that. She doesn't believe me. So
I have
I
not
do,
seen
I
a
do.
tarantula.
See, Brooke is like my 10th person that's come to support me. There's no tarantulas here.
I was telling Celeste the weirdest thing for me was bobcats.
Yeah.
Like literally, we had wild bobcats in the city streets, and that's the craziest thing to me that I've come across.
Well, I mean, I've been to Texas. I served my mission in Houston. So I can tell you what, I like Texas, but what I really miss when I'm there is like mountains. So I mean,
Yeah.
I was born in Reno, so I had the Sierras and I had Lake Tahoe, so I had giant mountains around me in Reno. And then then we moved to like Northern California, again, mountains. You've got that mountain chain, got ocean on one side, mountain chain on the other. I lived in Southern California, mountain chains, big mountains everywhere. And then I lived in Utah for a little bit. Work sent me there, big mountains everywhere. And then, and I did a stint in Mexico City, again, big mountains everywhere. And then I go to Texas and I'm like, I'm lost. Everything is so flat. Like, where's north and south? Like high noon, I have no idea where north and south is.
Yeah, that's true.
Unless you get over to Austin with the hill country, then you got a little bit of scenery, but
yeah. No, the scenery, I miss the scenery of Utah. And I don't like the humidity, but that's my only complaints.
yeah. So do you work down there, or are you going to school?
So I own a business with my sister.
Oh, okay.
So we sell stuff online. We're on Amazon and have a website. So I have flexibility. It's like the greatest job in the world. We get to just create fun products. And so that's what I do.
So
That's
interesting.
awesome.
So you run like kind of a drop ship store on Amazon sort of thing, or?
No, so we actually do Prime. So in order to get your products Prime, you actually have to send your inventory to Amazon. So they house it. So I have inventory. So yeah, we actually physically like get it manufactured, have it stored, and send it to Amazon for them to deliver it to customers. So
You have it
Very
manufactured in China?
yes, I do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I know a couple people who were looking to set up businesses, and they were looking at China. They would go over there and look at different factories because you can kind of get just about anything manufactured over there. It's really interesting.
Yeah. So when we first started, we started manufacturing in the United States. And once we started getting bigger and wanted to like make more custom things, and we looked into China, it's crazy because I'm like, the quality is so much better for such a lower price, So I was like, it's just like, in order to compete, you really have to make it to China eventually. So
What is it that y'all sell?
we do like gift products. So my sister is like, so I actually have an accounting degree. So I'm like a numbers person. And my sister's like the creative. I say she stole all the creative genes in the family. And so I actually had been selling on Amazon for years before, but it was just like boring stuff like shoe cream and just like random stuff. And I was like, this is not fun. I wanted to sell something unique. So I reached out to her and I said, hey, do you want to do this with me? Let's make like fun products. So we started out with like coffee mugs and tumblers and tote bags, and they all have like funny sayings on them, so something for a grandma or a nurse, or so it's just custom products like that people give for gifts. So
Very cool.
Nice.
it's really fun. My sister, she like designs like every product, and we get to work together and brainstorm. Like we're coming out with like cat lady products, just like fun stuff like that. It's really fun.
So wait, cat lady products, are you like, okay, you're like 60 years old and have 20 cats and like no kids?
So one of our best selling products, we have a tote bag it says dog mom. And so now we're making a cat mom one. So it's like a tote bag, and we have one that says like best cat mom ever. And then you say cat lady like it's a bad thing, because people call them crazy cat lady.
It's not a bad thing.
So yeah, just fun stuff like that. That's what we do.
Wow. So do you do pretty well with that, or is it just kind of like more of a side hustle kind of thing, and you've got main income somewhere else?
No, yeah, that's my full-time income. So It took a couple of years to build up, but now I can live off it, support my family. So very blessed.
Great.
Cool.
Maybe you
should
should
say what it is. I bet you Shasta, our awesome chat lady, will put your link in there if you.
Okay, yeah, I would love that. And I also want to just plug this because we sell our businesses. We celebrate people, and we struggle on I'm like, as a business, you need to be on social media, but we don't like being like in front of the camera, like, look at us, we struggle with that. And so we started doing, it's called Everyday Hero. And we have people nominate their everyday hero. Like you can go on our website, nominate your hero, and we choose someone. And we've actually started doing like live interviews with them. So the nominator gets on with the person they nominated and just tell us why why they're their everyday hero. And then we have like a custom water bottle that we send to them. And it's just been the most like, it's such a fun thing to do on social media. Like it just has meant so much to people that they've felt seen and appreciated just for doing simple things, you know. And so that's something I would love anyone that wants to nominate, like people, we just had one, she nominated her daughter, you know, and I'm like, it's been really fun. So that's something
Great.
I would love to, like, anyone here that would want to nominate, that would make my day.
Awesome.
That's great. Yeah. If you've got anybody, please feel free to put that in the chat and we'll make sure that that gets
Okay.
taken
And
I'll
then
put a link to that part where it's just a form that you fill out.
I was
to-
going to say, yeah, put it
Awesome.
on in the chat, or else tell us what it is, and someone in our chat will put it in the chat. So
Okay. Yeah, I would love that.
Shasta's kind of our designated
Yeah,
chat
I'm like,
person. She's
Shasta,
really
that's
good
you.
at like being a Johnny on the spot on that. So
so throwing in all the links.
right.
She's probably about 3 layers deep in Google right now.
I know. What's the name of your company so she can find it?
So the website's brookeandjess.com.
Brookeandjess.com, Shasta.
Yep.
Got it.
It's not the and sign, right? It's just A and D.
No, just, yeah, A&D. So
Okay.
Brooke with an E. And then if you just go, there's a everyday hero, and then there's like like an everyday hero. It's easy to find, and then it just says nominate. So that's the link. She can find it.
I'm sure she can.
Very cool.
Awesome.
Cool.
So it sounds like you're fairly, you're not kind of sitting around waiting for life to happen to you. You're going out and taking the bull by the horns and making it happen.
Oh yeah, that's me. I'm a go-getter. I
You're a
can't sit
go-getter.
still. Yep. A busybody.
So if you've got a 4-year-old, I'm guessing obviously it could have been 4 years ago that you guys were divorced or whatever, but how long have you been single?
So I filed for divorce July of 2019, and then the divorce was final like a year ago this month. So it took a little while.
All right. So a little while. Yeah. And then you get divorced right in the middle of 2020, which is
Yep.
like the
Which I
dumpster
didn't
fire
have to
year.
go into the courthouse. That was the benefit. They were like,
just stay home and get it done.
yeah, they were like, sorry, you don't have to appear before the judge. And I'm like, well, that's one benefit of COVID.
That's it.
Yeah. So now, obviously, if you have a 15-year-old, you guys were together for quite a while. How long were you married? Tell us a little bit about kind of all that. Where'd you come from relationship wise?
Yeah, so I got married at 19. So I was super young. We, went to college. We grew up together. I mean, so we went to high school together and then got married so young that it's like we went through college. We got the same degree, I feel like we just kind of like grew up together, started having kids, moved around a lot. We started a business together. So we worked together. Like we just did a lot of things. We moved to Texas, and so yeah, we were married. Let me think. It was almost 17 years. And year 10 is kind of when we started struggling. He struggled with pornography addiction. And so we started kind of going through that therapy. And I don't know if any of you have heard of the like Lifestar program. We did that. And that's just kind of where it started to go downhill. And then the more kids we had, the harder it got. And so finally 2018 was kind of like the year that was, I don't know, well, I'm trying to think of the word to say it, maybe rock bottom for us. It's just obviously anyone that struggled with pornography addiction, sex addiction, it's just a really, really hard road to recovery. And I am the type of person that I believe in the atonement of Jesus Christ, and I believe that people can change, and I was willing to forgive and do whatever we could, but the thing that I didn't do was set boundaries. And so things just got worse. And
when you say you didn't set boundaries, what do you mean by that?
I think it's just, I kind of knew, I knew about the pornography addiction about year 10 is when I found out about it. And it was kind of like I did it instead of, not that it's not my job, obviously, to like fix him or do his recovery or whatever. but I didn't like also set any boundaries about, I just assumed like he's working on it, you know, instead of like setting boundaries to protect myself. I just kind of almost avoided it, like thinking, okay, he knows he's fixing it. And it wasn't, he wasn't doing those things. And so things got worse. And then it was like, I was having babies. So I just kind of, instead of, I feel like I just avoided the problem, you know?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
easy to do, especially when you don't want to get divorced. Like
Yeah.
nobody wants to get divorced. Nobody wants to go through that. And so if somebody tells you, "Oh yeah, baby, I'm working on it. I'm going to therapy," you're like, "Whew, that's a relief," right? You're just kind of
Yeah.
like, "All right, let's keep moving forward."
Yeah.
And then, we kind of don't set those boundaries, or at least have checks and balances. Like, now I'm going to check up on you. I'm going to,
Yeah.
when I roll over and you're not in bed at 2 a.m, I'm going to come out and find you on the computer, aren't I? So
Yeah.
you got to set those boundaries and those checks,
Yes. So totally. I feel like I was just very complacent about it, you know?
But
So
do you think that was because you feared what you might have found if you dug into it? Or did you just
yeah,
dig in?
I think one, I'm a very trusting person. And so I don't struggle with those types of things. So it's just like, oh, like he's got this, you know? And secondly, yes, I think it's just like, I'm overwhelmed with life and I don't want to make a change, and I don't want to see it, I guess. I don't want to like face it, you know? So I think it definitely had to do with the fear of change and what's that going to look like, and avoiding it instead of feeling pain, you know, is easier in the moment.
So now, was this something that like you guys were in counseling for, or once, I mean, year 10, you're talking nearly half your marriage if you guys were 17 years.
Yeah.
So when that first started, was he just like, oh, no big deal, but it just kept happening over and over again? And then you're like, all right, well, he says he's talking to the bishop or he's in counseling or whatever. And you just kind of assumed that it was getting better.
Yeah. So we kind of went, so it was interesting because our first business we owned was an accounting business. And I actually worked for a therapist in St. George who he kind of headed the Lifestar program. And so without even knowing it, he educated me about pornography addiction, like just as a client, you know, I would go like talk about his accounting and he would kind of talk to me about stuff. And I feel like it was a way for God to prepare me, almost like I knew about it before it was my problem, you know, and I kind of understood it was like more, it's an emotional problem. It's not about the sex, it's about the emotional piece. So I kind of knew about that. And then we quickly moved to Texas because we had sold our business, and then we were in a place like farther out from Dallas. Anyway, once we got to Dallas, it was like I had found things in the mail or different things. So it's like I knew about it, but it was again kind of like, oh, out of sight. And then stuff I saw, like pornographic stuff, come in the mail, and it was kind of like, oh, okay, like what are we
So he
doing
was
here?
like ordering magazines type stuff in the mail?
It was like, it wasn't it was like an advertisement. It wasn't a magazine, but it was like something that came from an advertisement or something that I was like, oh wow, you know. So once we moved to Dallas, they have the Lifestar program there. That was kind of our first therapy, I guess, regarding that. And that's where you go as a couple. So the spouse goes, you kind of do things together, but you also have like separate groups. And so that's kind of where we started. And then from there, he started meeting with his own therapist. And basically they said, we didn't do a lot of couples counseling. It was more individual counseling. And then I'd take a break because I was having babies, and, you know, he was kind of like, again, working on it, but not working on it. So it wasn't until like I had my daughter, and it was just kind of like I got out of baby fog. Just like, okay, like what's going on here? And that's kind of when we got back into counseling. And
Now, I'm not familiar with LiveStar, so
okay.
maybe kind of fill us in a little bit on what that is. I'm sure there's probably other people that know. I'm just myself.
Yeah, so
I've never heard
it's
of
a
it.
program. I said it was started by a therapist that specializes in like pornography addiction. He's LDS. And it's a course that it's like a whole workbook. There's like 6 workbooks, and it's headed by a therapist. And this, like I said, you kind of have like some group meetings, you go together, and then you break out into like the women and men. And it's a great educational program. Like it educates you about it, and it's also the group aspect of connecting with other women going through it, because I feel like in the church especially, it's very hush hush. Like nobody knows. I don't know that nobody knows I'm dealing with it, and my best friend could be dealing with it,
Yeah.
you know, and most people don't talk about it. When I was in Flower Mound, I met a lady that nobody in her family knew what her husband was struggling with. Like I was the first person she talked to, and I was just like, it is such a lonely world for the addict and for the spouse. Like, because you don't want to throw your spouse under the bus, and like, it's not your story to tell, but you're also dealing with a lot. So it's a great program to kind of connect with other couples going through the same thing. And it's headed by a therapist, so each group has its own therapy, you know, like we had a woman therapist with the women, and then, but I mean, obviously it's whatever they decide. So
Yeah, I
that's kind
think
of
if
like
you're a sex addict, you don't want to be with a woman therapist.
yeah.
Probably would be focusing too much.
Unless she's like a 90-year-old cat lady or something. Maybe
Yeah,
you're
that's
right
a
there.
different story. But
Yeah.
hey, you might be into that. You know, you
Yeah,
just
it's
never
bad
know.
for her.
You never know, I guess. Everyone's got their type. So is this a church-wide thing, or is this just kind of a local thing?
It's
So-
not, it's not sponsored by the church, but it's a program that therapists can, like, I don't know if they necessarily purchase it, but yeah, it's not a church run thing, but it was made by LDS therapists. So, you know,
it's kind of the target audience.
yeah.
Yeah. Is that something that like LDS Social Services knows about type thing?
I don't even know.
Oh, okay.
I knew about it because
though.
I knew about it because like I said, I worked for the therapist in my accounting business.
Oh,
So
yeah. Well, I know the church does have, like I see here, Cosette saying the church has their own 12-step program.
Yeah.
But I know, so my ex was an addict, but like a drug addict, right? And so we would go to the church's 12-step program, and people would kind of go around and talk about that, but they had their own separate meetings for like pornography and sex addiction. I'm not exactly sure why they kind of split it up. Obviously, they're better at that than I am, but it was kind of almost the same thing. Like they would shuffle us out and like, hey guys, can you go out this door? Because we're getting ready to start the other meeting and we don't want you to see who's coming in. You're like, all right, no worries. But it was very discreet, you know, they were very, and I get it. I mean, it's not really any of my business. If there's somebody from my ward or my stake that I might know that's struggling with that, you know, that's between you, the Lord, and your bishop or whoever, you know, good luck to you, your spouse, of course. But yeah, it's an interesting sort of problem. I remember, so obviously, you know, when you go through addiction programs, one of the things that they're going to say is if you're an alcoholic, for example, you avoid the bar, right? You don't say, hey guys, I'm 12 years sober, and you go and hang out at the bar with your friends. Like you just avoid those areas. But I feel like with pornography, it's like in your face everywhere you go. Like, I mean, I've been sitting there checking out the grocery store with my kids, and you look over and there's a magazine and some girl in this little bikini, and you're like, well, okay, she's hot. Like, I'm not blind, right? But it instantly starts kind of like getting into your head. And somebody who has a porn addiction, it's like going into that bar, right? Like you can't get away from it because it's literally everywhere.
Yeah.
And I don't remember exactly like what it was. I think it was a leadership training meeting years ago, but President Eyring was talking about it. I never forgot kind of his comments on that. He's like, you know, I know these things are everywhere. And I know that like people's eyes can't avoid all of it. It's just literally impossible with our world today. But he said, I'll tell you what I am going to do is after this meeting, I'm going to go back to my hotel room. I'm not going to turn on the television. I'm not going to look at the magazines in the lobby. I'm not going to do any of that. I'm going to put my eyes and my thoughts where they're supposed to be. and avoid any sort of possibility that they fall on something that they shouldn't. And I'm like, that's pretty amazing. I probably wouldn't do that because I'd be like, gosh, I'd be so bored. Like, I just want to see what's on TV,
Yeah.
And I'm like, darn it, I know what's on TV. It's always like something. You're watching some Hallmark movie and you're like, God, of course. Yep. There's like girls in bikinis on Hallmark or something. And you think it's totally benign, but there it is. So,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
No, and I was going to just swap back to what she was saying before about how within the church things are just kept so hush hush, and I kind of understand that. I get it. I'd opted to keep what was going on in my life hush hush as well for my kids' sake. But there's such a value in sharing. Like I think I was really lonely. I felt like I was the only one ever to have to deal with what I was going through. I knew I wasn't, but that's how I felt. I felt really alone. And I'd look around at church every week and I'm like, all these people have great lives. They have no clue that mine is like literally just crumbled to the earth. And like I wish there would have been somebody there that would have been open about what they might have been struggling with so that I would have had someone to confide in. So even though I understand the hush hush, because I did that as well, I have to wonder if we're actually hindering, we could use our frailties and the things we're dealing with to help those around us so that we don't feel so lonely. I think it's a bonding thing. So as they're ushering people in and out of rooms, I mean, I get it, but at the same time, why can't we share those aspects of our lives? I don't know. Like there's other groups, people don't care. Like how many people that are recovering whatever's, I'm 20 days clean or whatever. Like they spout it out. They like shout it out to the world because they want to have people know that's just not how our culture is. But I wonder if that would be a benefit.
Well, and I think for women, especially for the spouse, and I mean, I don't know, like men could feel the same way, but when it comes to like a pornography or sex addiction and you're the spouse, there's this amount of shame that comes along with it because it's almost like you think something's wrong with you, because it's like that. It's not like, oh, he's drinking alcohol, but I'm like, when it comes to sex, it's like if you're the spouse and you're the only one that that's why you get married in the church, right? Partly, I'm like, if that's and you feel like you're not enough. And so I think there's this shame around it. I think so many women feel like they're not enough or there's something they're doing wrong. But I do think when you open up and realize you realize it has nothing to do with you. And I think that camaraderie, especially among the women, just knowing like, hey, this is not you. There's nothing wrong with you. Like, look at this person. Like they're all struggling with this. It doesn't have to do with you. I think that would be so helpful.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, there's so I'll give you a little bit of background for me. Like my job, I work for the FBI, and there were times where I had to work crimes against children and internet pornography kind of stuff. And I remember the bishop asking me if I'd give a fifth Sunday talk to the youth and the adults. The primary kids went off and did something else, but in there the bishop said I wanted to be completely frank and just be completely honest with everybody so that we can could we deal with this problem. And he told me that the stake president told him that pornography is a problem for about 10% of the population of the church. It's a pretty big number if you think about it. And so I did this fifth Sunday, and I basically got up and said that exact same thing. I said, look, 10% of you out there are struggling with this. If you think you're the only guy in the war struggling with this and you're like, oh, it's just me and I'm a creep, you're not alone. And then also there's a lot of misunderstanding behind why men get into porn and not women. And the reason why is because pornography is generally for one, let's be honest, it's generally for one thing for men. It's for masturbation. Mm-hmm. That's all they use it for. So if anybody thinks, oh man, how boring would that be to sit there and just watch a bunch of fake stuff on TV? No, it's for one purpose. It's men are visual and women are mental. And so when women masturbate, because they do, they they have their whole little program and the little fantasies going on in their head, and that's all they need. And guys are visual, and they got to see it. And so that's the only reason why men are having these problems and women aren't, with pornography. And so when we explained all that, and about that, it's like a drug, and that it's, that there's a dopamine dump, and it's just like taking drugs for some guys. Like that dopamine dump of having that release is what they're addicted to. And then they're also addicted to stuff that gets them more turned on. So the pornography ramps up and it gets crazier, and so anyway, that's just the whole purpose of what the whole addiction to addiction to pornography is. So
yeah, it's a tough thing. And I'm surprised. I mean, I would honestly, somebody said 10% seems a little low. I would probably say that seems a little low too. Just being in the other addiction recovery groups, I was surprised how many people are truly addicted to various things that, are in my ward or in my stake. And I'm like, oh, all right, here they are. And it's obviously very discreet. They ask you when you're here, everything that's shared here stays here. You don't go out and say, gosh, wow, did you hear sister so-and-so's story in there? That's crazy. Or brother so-and-so, I couldn't believe he's like got a meth problem. He seems so put together. So I think if we could really like pull back the curtain and see how prevalent this really is, we'd probably be shocked at some of the people.
Yeah, I agree.
Then again, that goes to like show us, we've all got something we're struggling with, but yeah. So when you first encountered this, year 10 of your marriage, was it a shock to you? I mean, I think, if I'm being honest, I think most girls would probably be like, just like a dagger in the heart. Why am I not good enough? You had kind of mentioned that. And it seems like you were like, well, okay, he'll just kind of work on it. Like, how did you feel? Like, tell me how
So
that.
I honestly, I think like God, like I said, God prepared me, because had I not been educated about it from that therapist, it would have broken me. But I think the fact that it had been like months that he had been teaching me about, like, I didn't know anything about pornography addiction, at all, and sex addiction. And I think just that therapist kind of educating me about it. And so me knowing it was an emotional problem, not like a sex problem, I think that I didn't feel, I mean, it's obviously, I remember because I was sitting in church, actually, like in a Relief Society lesson, and somebody brought up, I think the teacher brought up something about pornography. And I just had this, like, I feel like the spirit was like, ask your husband about this, and because I don't struggle with stuff like that. I just didn't even think about it. And so I asked him after church, and he admitted to it. And I think it was kind of like, because I had been in contact with that therapist, I had hope. Like, I was just like, okay, well, a lot of people struggle with this. Like, like, here's an avenue, like we can get through this. It didn't crush me, because I just feel like God prepared me for it. So
Now, in your application when you applied, I'm looking it up here because I remember you saying, this is where I feel like I connected with you. Like, in your application, you said, God wanted me to be happy, and so I opted for divorce. Now, that's kind of a controversial stance within the culture of our church, but I 110% agree, because that was the answer I got as well.
Me too.
How did you get to that point? Because since the culture is so no about divorce, and God can fix anything, and you're giving up, and this is an eternal marriage, you can't walk out, all the things that people try to throw at you. What is it that gave you the strength to recognize, no, my Heavenly Father wants me happy, and He wouldn't want this for me, and to move on?
Well, it's interesting, because I feel like from year 10 to year 7, I mean, I'm big on like personal revelation and the temple. And I spent so much time in the temple just praying, because I knew God's the only one that knows me, and he's the only one that knows my husband, you know, and the path for us, because I truly did have so much hope that we could get through this and people can change. And my answer was always like, fight for your family, fight for your family. He was out of the house multiple times. And, you know, there was just, and then I set, so the year of 2018 is when I finally set very clear boundaries of, here's what I'm not okay with. Like, if if this happens, I will leave. And it was really hard for me to set those boundaries. Even my therapist was like, if you say it, you have to do it. So it's like, make sure that like you really will, like you can't, Yeah. So I set those, and I think that alone, like once those boundaries were crossed and I said I was going to do it, it was like, it empowered me to know that I could. And then I prayed. I remember the boundaries were crossed and I was like, you have to get out of the house. Like, because again, I didn't want to get divorced still. But I went and met with my bishop, and he was just so great. I can't give you advice, but all I can tell you is divorce is so hard. So just make sure you're 100% sure, before you go there. And I went home and prayed that night, and it was like the immediate answer. My boundaries came into my head, and I just knew the answer was to leave. And then I went to the temple, and it was the same thing. And to me, it was such a testimony to personal revelation, because I'm like, up to that point, the answer was stay, fight for your family, stay, fight for your family. And then once it was time to go, it was like, okay, you can go.
Like that was me too. Like I kind of knew that it wasn't going to end well, but for some reason the Lord kept me hanging on and hanging on and hanging on, and then finally gave me the green light. And I remember thinking, I was actually kind of super shocked, because I didn't think that would ever come from Heavenly Father. I
was the same. Yeah.
Yeah. I had drank the Kool-Aid that no, like that's not even an option really. So I was kind of like, whoa, like really? And it just made me realize even more so how much Heavenly Father loves me as an individual. And he was like, no, like you're my daughter. I want you to be happy. I want you to find happiness. I want you to have everything that you deserve. And this is not what you deserve. And it was a great moment, but I was blown away, honestly.
I was the same. I was kind of like, are you sure you're okay? You're okay with this? Is that really the answer? Because that's kind of the answer I want, But I also, there's a book I read. It's a Christian author. He's not LDS. It's called When to Walk Away. I think it's Gary. I always say Chapman. It's not Gary Chapman. I can look it up. But because even after fighting for a divorce, I feel like I still struggle with guilt. Like, I feel like Satan was like trying to make me feel guilty. And I read that book, and he talked about marriage. He said, marriage is ordained of God. Obviously, God wants us to be married, but it also can become corrupt, just like anything else in the world. And ultimately, God cares about each individual soul more than he cares about the shell of a marriage. And that was just huge for me, because I'm like, it's like, it's true. He wants us to be happy, and he doesn't, I know for me, I had to go through my journey to learn what I had to learn to have my kids, and I'm such a different person because of what I went through. But I ultimately, I did everything I could, and I think God, and I know God's proud of me for what I did, and that he wants me to be happy. So
yeah, absolutely. I just think it's a testimony to everybody. Like, I feel like anytime someone throws out God can fix anything. He can fix your marriage. I'm just like, I mean, yeah, at the root of that, absolutely. But he's not going to overpower someone else's agency.
Right, exactly. He gave,
say, hey, you ex or you husband, you need, or wife, whichever the case is, you need to follow and do as I ask so that this marriage doesn't fall apart. That's not how it works. And I think some people just need to recognize that and be kind to those of us who opt for a divorce. So
there's a couple of comments just want to kind of address really quick. It sounds like these are simple statements that people are making about You know, why can't a man just have more sex with his wife? Or why can't, you know, why does a man need porn? And it really has, it's the same question you could ask about, why does my wife need to take opiates? Why does she need to smoke pot? Why does she need to do cocaine? Well, I don't know. Why does she do it? Like, why can't she just be happy in her marriage? Why does she need drugs to make her feel good? Why can't she feel good just hanging out with her husband? It's so those are the same reasons. I mean, it's an addiction. There's a dopamine chemical dump that happens. They visually see something exciting on the screen, then they commit a physical act on themselves, and the dopamine and all the chemicals explode in their brain, and they're like, oh, that was awesome. It's a totally different experience than having a romantic, you know, interlude with your wife. It's a drug that they're seeking. They're seeking that quick high. And so, you know, it's easy to say, oh yeah, you know, just have more sex with your wife and you won't have a sex addiction. Well, that's not, it's all psychological, and it's just similar to what when people have drug addictions. So
Yeah.
Well, and from what I have learned about sex addiction, it's about the reason a lot of people, a lot of them struggle is because they need connection, but they don't know how to seek that out. Because it's not like, yeah, you're married, of course you can have more sex, but it's easier rather than connecting emotionally with someone. It's easier to just go to a computer screen and take care of it yourself, and you get that high without having to interact with someone.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
it's not about the sex, it's about the like emotional, the, like you said, the emotional connection, the high they're getting from that, and it's just way easier to get it from not a person.
exactly.
Yeah, you know, there's also been a couple comments here about statistics, and I just briefly looked these up. I kind of wanted to share some, and this comes from a website called the recoveryvillage.com. It's an addiction recovery site. So here's some, and some of these are, I don't even know what to think about them, but they're interesting statistics. But so online porn statistics, I'll just read a few of these. 25% of all search engine requests are related to sex. That's 1/4 of every internet, Google, Yahoo, DuckDuckGo, any of the other search engines, I guess. 35% of downloads from the internet are pornographic. 40 million Americans say they regularly visit porn sites. 70% of men aged 18 to 24 visit a porn site at least once per month. Now, obviously, this is just general statistics. This isn't church statistics. The largest consumer group of online porn is men between the ages of 35 and 49. 1/3 of all internet porn users are women, though, so 33%. Sunday is the most popular day of the week for viewing porn, which I find really interesting. And what day of the year would you guess is the most popular porn viewing day of the year? This one, I have no
Valentine's
idea
Day.
why. What day?
Valentine's Day.
Valentine's.
Nope. Nope. You
Christmas.
would think, right? Not Valentine's Day. This one's really weird. I don't get it, but I'll give you a hint. Up. Paige got it. Okay.
Oh,
So,
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
There's a
I
lot of
don't have
loneliness.
any idea what Thanksgiving and porn have to do together, but
They're stuffed. They're not hungry.
Loneliness. Guys are like, man, here I am sitting at home with my TV dinner.
okay, but yeah, you're lonely, but wouldn't you be more lonely on Valentine's Day or even Christmas? You know?
Well,
Maybe
no, you're out on the prowl. On Valentine's Day, you're out on the prowl and hoping to get lucky.
Yeah. I don't
Wow.
know.
Weird.
That one's kind of strange to me, but you know, obviously 1/3 of internet porn users are women. So this isn't exclusively a male issue.
Oh no. Yeah, absolutely not.
But it's
And-
growing. Like somebody did mention that it's growing, but you know, I went back to in 2005, 2006 when I was doing my, you know, fifth Sundays for the stake, you know, and I'll tell you what though, the majority of the people coming in and talk to the bishop after those meetings were men. 100% of them were men. Like the bishop would come up like the next Sunday and say, Corey, thanks for the meeting. 5 guys set up appointments with me and they all came in to talk about their porn problem. So, I mean, and there probably were 25 other guys who were too chicken to do it.
Too
or
afraid to
didn't
do
want to
it.
give it up yet.
Yeah.
But, at least 5 guys showed up. I don't think there were any women that showed up. So,
Hmm.
you know,
Interesting.
but also women, again, go back to what women like. Women read those romantic novels, right? They read those like graphic novels, like, where the guy's, 18th century England, and he rides up on a horse and they camp out in the barn and they do the deed in the hay, and the girl's reading the novel, and it's still pornography. It's just a different type because, women are more here and not in the visual. So
Yeah.
We have an imagination.
I know, I guess we
more,
do.
more of imagination.
We
And
have better
maybe
imaginations than you
and
men.
maybe the porn that women are looking at are more like storytelling porn, like, soft porn with a story, and guys are just like, give me that, 20-minute clip where they're just doing it. I don't need the story. I want the pirate ship. I just want the, the sex. So guys are more, visual. So
Yeah. So, Brooke, one of the questions I had going into it, I mean, obviously you got married at 19, you grew up in Utah, and this is no knock on Utah or anybody in Utah, but I've seen people on the show before that come in and they've made comments, and they seem to be almost, there's a level of naivete that kind of goes around. They're like, I just didn't really know a lot about it. And maybe part of that is the culture of the church, right? Like, it's taboo. We don't talk about it. We don't go down those roads very often. But for you going into this, what was it like when you first got married? Was this just like a kind of an eye-opening, didn't know what to expect? Or were you pretty well versed? Was your family open talking about sex and things of that nature?
Oh no, my family, like, we were the family that nobody fights, but nobody talks about anything. Like, we're all pretty, but I also didn't experience like my siblings, so we didn't have a lot of contention in the house. We didn't talk a lot about hard things though, so it's like I feel like I was very naive for sure. And I also didn't see a lot of diversity, like, all of us went to church. We didn't have any like close friends or family like dealing with hard things. And so I definitely would say I was very naive.
So was sex to you kind of a shocker? Like, especially when you get into porn, because they get into some pretty crazy stuff in some of those. And it just seems like when people start off with porn, it might start very simple, but then quickly you need to have like, you have to get deeper down the rabbit hole, to get a better fix or whatever you want to call it for that.
Yeah, I feel like he hid it from me very well. I didn't know. Like, I didn't know sex wasn't like some crazy thing, It was just normal. There wasn't any issues with it. I really didn't have any idea. And still, until we got more into kind of like, in therapy, they do what's called like a full disclosure, where they go through everything that they've ever done. And I said, until then, I didn't even know a lot of it.
Wow. So now that you're back in the dating pool, is that a topic you bring up? Like, if you're dating someone for an extended period of time or however long, do you bring up pornography as, hey, do you have a problem with it? Do you view it? Like my daughter, that's like one of the first questions on her list when she starts dating someone. That's one of the things in her mind that she's really worried about, because it is really rampant up at BYU. And so she doesn't want to get stuck with that type of stuff. But how do you deal with it now that you're dating?
So, I'm pretty new into dating. So I'm like, I haven't like gotten into anything really serious, but I feel like I do more approach it like, how do you feel about it? Because if someone, I feel like if someone tells me that they've never seen it or don't masturbate or whatever, I feel like I would not believe that, And so for me, I just more try to make it an open conversation of like, oh, how do you feel about it? And
Right.
kind of see what.
So you wouldn't like just blatantly ask, hey, do you view pornography? You'd more just bring up the topic and see how they react. And
Yeah, I think if I was seriously dating someone, obviously I would pry a little bit more, but
right. Especially with what you've gone through, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that must be a hot topic.
Oh
I
yeah,
can understand
totally.
why.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
So
100%.
speaking of dating, you say, are you dating a lot, or do you have any fun stories you can share with us? Those are always fun on here. Any fun, crazy dates?
I'm trying to think. I mean, it's been pretty. I started, I don't know. I don't really have any like fun things. Just like I said, I've casually dated. I started dating like last year, pretty soon after my divorce was final, just casually. And I'm like, and it's been fun. Honestly, it's like for me, I haven't, I feel like because of what I've been through, it'll take me a long time to like trust someone. So I'm like, it's almost been more just like fun getting to know. I love getting to know people, and it makes me feel kind of like I'm rediscovering myself and who I am. I'm like, oh, you don't know me as a mom of 5 kids. So it's like it kind of brings out my playful side. And so I've had fun with it, you know. So
Well, good.
I think I'm just very like cautious about, when you're lied to, and like I'm a very trusting person, but I just know I'm gonna have to like have a lot of time to kind of see how they are, see how they react, So I'm just
Yeah.
having fun with it right now, just taking it easy.
Well, good. It's a good
So
route to take.
if you're out there dating and let's say you meet some guy online, and let's face it, at this stage of the game, we're all like in the dating pool for one reason or another, right? Like obviously something isn't quite clicking right, or we went through a terrible divorce or something, right? We've all got something that we're working on.
Yeah.
If you got on there and you met some guy that you really liked and he had a porn addiction, would that be something to you? You're like, absolutely not, no. Or do you feel like, okay, I need to know more about where this person's at and where they're going? Like how would you handle that?
I am so like much about like I said, I believe in the atonement, and I believe people struggle, and I know nobody's perfect. And so I wouldn't run for the hills. Like I would definitely, see where they're at. Again, any type of addiction, I'm like, it is such a struggle to go through, but I know people that have been through it and have made it successfully, and they're some of the most amazing people I've ever met, because I'm like, having gone through that and conquered it, even though it's a lifelong struggle. I'm like, if you struggle with that, it is a lifelong struggle that you have to be so diligent. But I'm like, it's I mean, I feel like people that have gone through stuff like that can be some of the like most amazing people ever. So it's just really like where their heart's at. And I think that's why I stayed in my marriage for so long, because I'm like, anyone can get through that if they really want to.
If they want to. Well, the Lord can make our weaknesses our strengths.
Yeah,
And so um, I have no doubt if the person's willing to do what they need to do to change and reroute their brain, because it does kind of reroute the brain,
oh,
right? But to
totally.
kind of get it back on track, then that can be their strength.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And there's so many people they could help, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Exactly.
so
So that you don't really have like a kind of a litmus test, so to speak, and saying like, all right, if they've got porn addiction, no, I draw the line there. Because I see this a lot, like people who've been through experiences, and I totally get it, right? Like I don't
Mhm.
know if I would want to be married to somebody again who has addictions or who like has cheated on their spouse. I'm like, I've already been down that road and I don't know that I want to go down there again. But at the same time, we all have some sort of baggage. None of us are perfect,
yeah.
but it doesn't sound like you're basically cutting that off. It doesn't sound like you're just,
No, I feel like I go so much like off the spirit and how I feel. So it's like I can't say. It's not, I don't know. I just believe there's good in everyone. And that's kind of what got me in the position with my marriage, obviously, like to the point of getting taken advantage of. But I, I feel like it's also a strength that I have, that I am like, I am trusting. I can see the good in people. So I'm like, if I found someone and felt right, it wouldn't I wouldn't run for the hills, but it wouldn't. I'm also going with eyes wide open instead of like, oh yeah, like everything's gonna be fine. It's like, I feel like I have a lot more wisdom, obviously, and so there's a lot more things I would have to see before I would feel safe with someone like that, because
I'm the same way. I'm the same way
Yeah.
because I didn't have somebody who was addicted to porn, but I had somebody that cheated on me 3 times, and the topic is like red flags and Christlike love, right? So
Yep.
I tried 3 times to be like, okay, I forgive you, and after the third time, you're just like, I can't do this anymore. Like I even told her, I said, look, that last time, I mean, I could have survived maybe 2, but that third time, it's like that was a nail in the coffin of our marriage. Because I mean, just do I feel like a smuck just kind of just going like, I forgive you, and she's like, oh, I could do it again because he'll just forgive me.
mhm.
Like the next time some handsome guy hits on me in the store and I pass his number, then go out to dinner, go out to lunch while my husband's at work, and whatever happens happens, and then he'll forgive me, right? There's only a certain point that you can only take so much,
Mhm.
and you're not being anti-Christ love by divorcing. So I think that's important for people to understand.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
actually a good, what she was saying. I was thinking that it's a really good segue into the topic because you were saying that you saw the good in him so much that you allowed him to treat you poorly. And so there is there's a balance that has to be kind of made there. Like you absolutely need to love people, but at the same time, you need to find yourself a safe spot when there's red flags so that you're not sucked into scenarios that are toxic and harmful. So, I mean, what type of red flags and how do we balance that Christ-like love and loving those people while being, a safe distance away? It's a tough one. I posted on it in the Facebook, and there's lots of different people with lots of different opinions on it. And I was pretty shocked. I thought it was kind of cut and dry, but it's just not. People have a lot of strong opinions on that topic.
Yeah, I feel like
Anybody?
once you've kind of gone down the road of divorce or something, red flags are going to be abounding for whatever pain you've experienced. Um, honestly, Brooke, I'm a little surprised that it's not more of a red flag for you. I mean, maybe that's a good thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
But so if it's not porn, that's like kind of a cutoff red flag. What kind of red flags do you look for? What's sort of like I just can't go there.
A big one is not taking responsibility.
But how would you know if you're like, okay, I'm looking at these guys and oh, there's this guy, I'm chatting it up, he's really cute. How would you know? What would be some triggers for you to say like this guy didn't take responsibility?
I mean, I think it's just everyday life situations, if I feel like for me, I'm one, it's like if something happens, I'm not a blamer. I don't blame other people. I always like look to myself and maybe what I can do or whatever. And I feel like everyday situation, I mean, once you get to know somebody, you can quickly see how they react to situations. Are they blaming their ex for everything? Like, oh, it was my ex's fault and blah, because I'm like, even in my situation, I went through a lot of betrayal and that, but I'm like, I still own my piece of it. And I think that's a huge thing for me is just like, how do they talk about their ex? And, because I think like, do they take responsibility for their actions or?
Okay, so I'm going to be the one, the one that always says this. I actually take zero responsibility for my divorce. I really do. I fought for so long to keep it together, and I just couldn't do enough for both of us, honestly. But at the same time, I don't speak evil about my ex at all. I've been very kind about him. But so I think you can still be very kind and not bash your ex while not taking responsibility. I mean, I'm an imperfect person. I'm not saying that in the marriage I didn't make mistakes, but when it came to the divorce itself and everything that led up to that, like I don't take any ownership. I honestly feel like I did everything in my power to keep it together, and it just wasn't enough for me and him both to get it
Yeah.
through. So yeah, I'm going to be the I'm going to be the negative one on that. Be the outlier. I know a lot of people like to, you know,
But I think when you're going into a new relationship, are you like, well, I'm perfect and I didn't do anything?
no,
Yeah, you know, and I think that's where it's more, I feel the same way. I did everything I could, but I'm like, going into a new relationship, I know that if I want a different dynamic, I have to change how I am. And like, I can't do the same behaviors I did. You know, I
yeah,
can't do those things that I allowed. I can't allow someone to walk all over me and expect
right. Yeah, I
different
guess
results.
in that way, like I've grown to realize that I can't change another person, right? Like I
Mhm.
can't have him or someone else do what I need them to do. I mean, in that way, I guess there's growth. And I mean, I learned a whole bunch through the process. I grew a lot. But those type of things are learning opportunities that the Lord has given me through a very, very, very difficult situation. Because I think any difficult situation you can learn from if you
Yeah,
allow, you know, those moments. But even then, I just don't feel ownership. I just don't. I fought, and it just
yeah,
didn't happen. But there's definitely learning and growth that came
yeah,
from it.
totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I look back now. I mean, I learned by looking back at my mistakes. But I was married for 22 years, but I got married young. I was 22, and there were a lot of red flags while I was dating. But I was just young and dumb and didn't really know what I was seeing, and I didn't know anything about like borderline or any of those other kinds of problems. And it is unfortunate that my spouse or my ex, that she suffers a lot tremendously from abandonment issues. And I don't know where it stems from, if it comes from her family or what, but she seriously struggles with that. And while we were dating, I remember coming back, from work one time, and she had a key to my apartment, and then she would sometimes go in and cook dinner or whatever, but she went in to cook dinner, and then she started going through my stuff, and she found old high school pictures of girls, that like prom pictures and girlfriend pictures, that were in an old shoebox. She's like, why are you still looking at these? Why are you still have these? And I'm like, I'm not looking at them. They're in a shoebox. It's all dusty. Like, I'm not sitting there looking at my glory days. I mean, but she was so ingrained with it. He's going to leave me and he's cheating on me, and look at his attitudes. And those were huge red flags I didn't even catch. And then it was 22 years of that same stuff. You're home late, and why do you have to go play basketball? And all these things. I mean, basketball is abandoning her. I'm leaving her for basketball. I'm leaving her for golf. I'm leaving her for my job. I'm leaving her for overseas trips that take me out of the country for a month. It was just constant abandonment issues. And so when I meet women that, when they exhibit those abandonment issues, man, there's like a Corey size shaped hole in the wall where Corey just blasted through to get the hell out. So it's really tough.
Yeah.
I think another big red flag for me is just respect. How
Oh,
they treat me, and just how they treat anyone. How do they treat the waiters? How do they treat friends or someone that wronged them? Respect is a huge thing for me.
yeah. I think that how they treat their family members, their mother,
Mhm.
if they're alive, I think that absolutely is like because when you're dating and stuff, like everyone's on their best behavior and,
Yeah,
trying to hide the bad sides and stuff because, no one's going to be like airing their dirty laundry at first. But those type of things, how they interact with others, maybe even when it's like a tough situation, like, the waiter spills their food all over their lap or something where they can't like stop and think and process it through to put their best self forward. You'll see like the real reactions. Yeah, that's important. I think
Yeah,
those
if
are
they're
really
offended by all kinds of things, like, yeah,
Mhm.
I did go on a date once where the woman was completely offended by, like, why is it taking so long? I mean, if I was a waiter, I would have had the water on the table by now. I mean, I was like, whoa, relax. Like, this is a date. We're supposed to have a conversation. Like, so the water's a little late. Like, so the waiter didn't bring, a menu on time. It's like that she was just like really upset and offended by the way she was being treated. And I was like, whoa, red flag right there. So
I think another red flag I was just thinking about was victim mentality.
yeah,
I just can't. I
big one.
can't even. I can't even.
Yeah. That's a hard one. And I think that's a big thing. There's a lot of people that really don't want to take accountability.
Mhm.
And it's tough. And I don't know, like, I'm not sure how, obviously you're on the Facebook pages and stuff, but it's interesting to watch people as they interact on, just posts and things. And you can see, do they play the victim? Like, do they
Yeah.
try to feel like poor me, or, the world's out to get me? Do they become easily offended? I like to post things to see, like, what side of this aisle are you on? There's usually like a which side do you take kind of thing on my posts. And I think it shows a good representation of possibly who the person is, versus like a mutual app where you get like, 2 sentences and 3 photos or whatever like that. I think that the Facebook pages are a wonderful way to kind of get to see a little bit more of their personality and who they really are, because they can't really hide it forever on
Oh,
there.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah, there's
I can't-
definitely a lot of that. Those are great. Those are great posts. I've done that.
Yeah.
I've posted a few triggers, and it went like wildfire.
Yeah.
But just asking a simple question like, well, we're all single. Shouldn't we all be exercising and trying to get in best shape? And just people lose their mind. Like, you don't understand. I've got glandular problems. I mean, it's like they just, they're so angry about me
Yeah.
posting that. And I'm like, hey, dude, I struggle with weight too. I have to work out really hard and eat like not the most tasty food just to stay in shape. So, I struggle with it too. I wish I
Yeah.
could eat cake every night and not gain weight, but that's not a reality. So
Reality. No,
and
it's
people
not.
just lose their mind, like you're just a cruel man. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry.
Well, Corey, you actually kind of are mean. I don't know.
That is mean. I know.
Well, it's just, even seriously, I know I just said this, but even when I posted the post about red flags and how it is okay to step aside and stay in a safe boundary and recognize red flags. And because if you don't, the Lord doesn't want you unhappy. He wouldn't want you in the mix of all that toxicity. But there were people who really, really, really got upset on that. Like, they were really, like, just floored that was a stance that some people take. And I was kind of like, okay. Because I didn't post it as one I thought would have any controversy. I thought it would be like, oh yeah, we're all going to kumbaya on this topic, because yeah, it's important to recognize red flags, and it's important to love from a distance in those scenarios. But that wasn't the case. I was
Like,
surprised.
there's nothing you can post on the LDS dating scene that won't at least draw somebody to be offended. It's
Probably
like so easy.
But at least because you're going to offend them if you leave the socks on the floor, or if you're having a bad day and you're grumpy, they're going to be offended that you're grumpy and not happy. And you're like, boy, I don't want to be the person who can't like not be offended. Not like, you're just a jerk. I'm like, no, I'm having a bad day. As a person, I'm not a jerk, but today it's a bad day. So
It's been a bad day.
We all have our bad moments, for sure. So, when you were talking about, sorry, I had to step away for just a minute. My kids called. They always have the worst timing for some reason. But when you're talking about red flags before, one of the things that you had mentioned was whether or not people take responsibility. And you kind of look at that as sort of a kind of maybe something that you shy away from. And for me, that's like a huge thing. Like, if I'm looking at somebody to date them, then I would look at somebody and say, okay, what's going on? What happened in their last relationship? And before, I used to think, all right, it's the classic old, they say this, their spouse says that, it kind of lies somewhere in the middle. But having been down the road myself, it doesn't always lie in the middle. And so sometimes there are situations where people are like, you know what, this is what happened to me. And I didn't necessarily like agree with it, but I didn't have a choice. And so I had to get out of there. They did this to me. Like, I mean, I've seen people that have gone through, their spouse got thrown in prison and all kinds of things. It's just a situation where everybody has a different story. And so to me, probably more so than just do they take responsibility. But if they're claiming that they are the victim in their marriage, which may be the case, again, what Celeste said is I look at kind of the second tier level of, okay, how do they treat their spouse? Maybe they were definitely a victim, but do they have to sit around and bash them? And I think you both mentioned that too, right? Like,
Yeah,
oh,
you don't
my
have to do
my
that.
ex is such a jerk and they're a narcissist in this. If they're going to sit around and continue to do that, that makes it really difficult. That's a
Yeah.
huge red flag for me. And my spouse or my ex-spouse is, she's difficult. I'll just say that. But still, um, in that situation, I can always find something that I, as you had mentioned before, Brooke, I did wrong in the marriage or something I could have done better. And honestly, I want no part with fighting with them. It's those people who just continually want to like project those pains outward. I'm like, you're just not ready. Does that make sense? You know,
Yeah.
somebody who's just so damaged that it's all the other person's fault. I had nothing to do with it. And I'm just going to project that pain outward and I'm just going to continue hating them. It just, to me, that's like a toxic red flag. It says you're not ready yet, you know, to date or to move forward because you haven't sort of healed those pains.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So
Yeah, I
what,
mean, yeah, you have to resolve those pains. I mean, that's part of the repentance process as a victim. You have to deal with that pain. You can't make that pain a trophy and put on your mantle. And every day you come home, you're like, oh, there's that freaking pain right there, you know, and you got to get rid of it. Just like you get rid of sin, you've got to purge all of your anger and hate and rage and whatever you're feeling, hurt. That's all got to be given to the Savior through the atonement also. So a lot of people think the atonement is just for sin. It's not. It's for the victims of sin. It's for
Absolutely.
everybody. And so when somebody can get on their knees, just like you do when you repent, and you can get on your knees and say, take this from me. I'm giving it to you. Take it from me. It works. I had to do the same thing. I had to get on my knees and I had to say, you know, take this. Don't let me become this victim guy who's like, oh, women cheat and and just, I'm never getting married again. Like I couldn't walk around like that, putting that trophy on the mantle and pointing at it every day with my, you know, like, so I don't know. You got to do that.
Yeah. And another thing, oh, go ahead, Brooke.
You can go.
I was just going to say that another thing to kind of go along with what Corey was saying is that I think that with the whole red flags and Christ-like love, like obviously there were a lot of red flags. I mean, in probably all of our divorces and scenarios. But if we're able to say, kneel and pray for our exes and for their healing and for their betterment, that's a way we can love Christ like a Christ and be like him, yet have removed ourselves from the situation to where it's not hindering us. And I think as we're able to, like Corey said, use the atonement as the one who was affected by the sinner and to be healed that way, then you really can offer love to the one who hurt you and offer that forgiveness and that hope. I mean, I hope my ex has a wonderful life. I hope he figures everything out. And I hope because that would be beneficial to my kids for them to see him happy and his best self. That'd be great. Why would I not want that for him when that's best for him and for my kids, you know? But it takes a lot of healing to get to the point where you can genuinely feel that. But I mean, that's a way to offer love while steering clear of the red flags. So
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think what Corey was saying, I think it happens more in our church too, because we put such emphasis on marriage that it's like we think our spouse is going to fix us. So it's like, I'm not happy and, you know, oh, this happened so if I just find someone different, like my life will be complete. And it's like, no, our life is complete through Jesus Christ. Like, he is the healer. He is the fixer. Like, no one else can, it's no one else's job to fix us and make us whole. And even I think in my marriage, I felt like I could rescue my ex. It's like, oh, like he's struggling, like we can do this. I'm this rescuer. And you know, and now I've had to learn, like, no, like I'm not the savior. Like, the savior, that is his job. The savior is the only one that can heal anybody, you know, and our job is to just heal ourselves through Christ, whether we were abused, like whether we were the one sinning, like Corey said, or we were the victim. Like, I am, like, it's just, no new spouse is gonna fix us. You're just gonna move into a new marriage with different problems, you know, because we're all human. Like,
We're all imperfect. So
yes.
yeah, we don't
You're
come
just
We're gonna
trading
see
one
red
problem for
flags
another
everywhere.
problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to see red flags everywhere. If we don't fix ourselves, we're going to walk into a marriage going, "You're just like my ex," and then it's all downhill for that next marriage.
Yeah, you can't start out with that.
Exactly.
There is a talk by Ronald Rasband. I don't know, or I'm sorry, James Rasband. I don't know if there's any relation to Elder Rasband of the Quorum of the 12, but James Rasband used to be the head of the law program at BYU, and he gave a talk called Faith to Forgive Grievous Harms. And it's basically when somebody's really wronged you, how do you forgive that? Because, you know, not everything, like I said, not everything is kind of a 50-50 proposition. Somebody could come in and just, maybe they break into your house and steal all your stuff, right? That's not like a halfway there. They're partly to blame, so am I. They did this to you. And there's never an option in the scriptures that say, you know, we have to forgive them unless they did this and it was your ex-spouse, then, you know, that's okay. It's no, you have to forgive. And for my ex, for example, I pray for them every night and every morning. And some days it's hard. I'm going to admit, like some days I'm like, you know, giant meteor, that would be great right about now. But it's still something I know I need to go through. So I'm going to put the link here in the chat for anybody that wants to kind of see the talk. But I really believe that when we go through and we see these red flags, some of those are healthy, right? Sometimes we need to see something and say, okay, this is something that's not good for me. And those are okay. But sometimes there's those red flags that are our projections from our own pains that we've experienced. And how do we know the difference? How do we know that this is something I can't live with? And this is something that, you know, is just me with some pains that I'm working through.
I think of therapy and I think of prayer, a lot of prayer, because I'm like, God's the only one that knows, truly.
Yeah, I mean, I was going through therapy. The hang up I had, so I was doing a lot of reading about forgiveness, right? And of course, you read that famous question that Paul had, you know, like, how many times should I, you know, forgive my neighbor? And the Lord comes up with like a mathematical formula. And you're like, he's like, man, that's a lot, right? And so I was thinking, oh, so I only did it 3 times. I'm still like, I still got 400 times more to go or whatever. So I talked to my therapist about it, and she said, no, that doesn't mean you stay with them. She goes, you have to forgive. You have to forgive no matter how many times. And you know what? Even though I've been divorced from her, she still offends me. She still calls and she still, you know, cries about how I left her and I ruined our, you know, we had a celestial marriage and now we don't. And I'm a horrible person because I broke up a celestial family. And what kind of a priesthood holder does that? And she goes right down the, you know, the soul cutting, you know, list, you know, cut me. Oh, I'm a terrible priesthood holder. I'm a terrible man. And then I have to forgive her again. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm getting up to that 400 mark, you know, of forgiving her all the time. And I have to, you know, and like Everett said, I got to pray for her, even though she just left me a nice long message on my voicemail about how I'm a terrible person for, you know, it's been 5 years and she still thinks I'm a terrible person for leaving her. So
yeah, I think Brooke, you hit it on the head. I think a really good counselor is perfect, as you know, along with praying. I think that because if you can't see your own hurt, or if you haven't healed from your own hurt, I don't know if you're going to be able to look past red flags that really aren't massive red flags. You're just perceiving them as such. So I think as you pray and go through counseling, like you said, good therapists, like you're able to heal, and then you can recognize real red flags, right? Versus just, hey, every time my ex looked at me like that, I knew something bad was happening. So don't you be looking at me like that, because that's a red flag. Like that doesn't make any sense, right? But if it's still hurting you, that's how you're going to perceive it. So the healing through the atonement and prayer and through a therapist, I think that's the perfect combination to be able to get to where you see the real red flags versus just the pain from the last situations you've been through. So
Yeah, and I think it takes a lot of self-compassion. Kristen Neff has an amazing book about self-compassion where it's just being, instead of judging your thoughts, just being able to recognize them and get them out. And I think even that, my poor sister that I work with, because I'm with her all the time, like half the time I'm like, it's like a therapy session, because it's like, but I'm like just getting things out and like speaking them. It helps you to like process and be like, just even if you don't have a therapist, if your therapist isn't available or you don't see them that often, just being able to have a trusted person you can just talk to unfiltered, and that you don't judge yourself for thinking, because a lot of times you're like, this sounds so stupid, but just to be able to get it out and have self-compassion and just be like, it's okay. Like,
it's okay. Well, sometimes your logic doesn't, match up with your feelings. So sometimes if we're speaking our feelings, we're like, this is a hot mess, but it's okay because speaking it processes it, right?
Yeah.
And there's a huge power in spoken word. And a long time ago, I was at a fireside or something, some sort of meeting, and it was about the spoken word and how literally creation happened by Christ speaking. You know what I'm saying? Like there is so much power in our words. And like when we testify, when we have testimony, meaning, and we testify of what we know, there's just such a power in speaking. And so even if you're like talking to your sister about all your crazy feelings that don't make any sense logically, it's okay, because guess what? That is powerful and it's helping you heal. Absolutely. 100% agree.
So I think what we're going to do here in just a minute is open it up to some questions. There seems to be a topic that a lot of people have opinions on or questions about. And we would definitely want to hear from others in the audience because, this is just one that everybody has something that's either going to trigger them or they feel like they are triggered by. So we want to open it up to kind of see if you've got comments or questions. And we ask, if you do this, please be respectful. If you're not, obviously we'll boot you, but we want to have
that power.
Yeah, I mean, we don't want to have to use that, but of course. So what we ask is, if you're interested in posing a question to any of us, including Brooke or myself or Celeste or Corey, please raise your hand. Corey can post the instructions because he's always great at doing that in there.
Good at that.
And we'll take that each one at a time. We'll ask you to come on. You can turn your camera and microphone on. If you just prefer to have your microphone on, that's okay as well, because we understand sometimes people are sitting around in their pajamas watching this and they're not looking their best. That's okay. So while we're waiting for people to raise their hand, so Brooke, tell me a little bit about what you've seen so far on the dating groups. Have you seen stuff that you're like, it just seems to me there's a lot of people looking to heal, or are you like, no, everybody seems pretty straightforward? I mean, do you see red flags that kind of make you a little concerned?
Yes. I think for me, a big thing is I've noticed a lot of men, especially, there's still like a really deep attachment to their ex, that's like, that's kind of and I don't know women either, but I'm like, it seems like it just time. I guess it seems that there needs to be a lot of time that people need to kind of like, you know, heal. And I don't know, I think the whole blending families, like that stuff, I just don't like drama. So I'm like, I think that's like a fear I have of mine, which.
So would it be a red flag for you then if you met somebody and you really kind of hit it off and then you found out they had a toxic ex? Because you know they're kind of attached to that person.
Yeah, I think that would be definitely a red flag for me, just because I think especially like with my kids, you know, I'm like, I want to protect them as much as I can. And bringing in toxic, you know, it's just going to be a part of your life, and that's scary to me. But
yeah, definitely.
All right.
So it looks like we've got Jamie.
We've got Jamie who just raised her hand.
Hey guys.
Hey, how are you,
Hi,
Jamie?
how's it going?
Good. This is my first night seeing any of this, and I just think it's great that everyone gets together and we have this support in Christ. So thank you.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Great.
Welcome.
Yeah.
So I have a question. So I know, Brooke, when you were pregnant with your daughter and going through that whole experience, you said you were kind of like dealing with what you had to deal with instead of having to deal with, you know, your ex and his addiction. But I'm trying to find examples of what healthy boundaries look like when you are in that kind of relationship. If you could go back, now that you know what you know, what kind of healthy boundaries do you think you would have placed? And if so, in the future?
so, yeah, because I kind of set mine late in the game. You know, I think it's different for everyone, but for me, a big thing was accountability. I mean, like we were talking about, like a drug addict or whatever, or the bar for an alcoholic. Well, for a pornography addict, like their phone, that's basically a bar. I mean, they can get to anything at any time.
Mhm.
And so that's a big boundary I would set, that they have accountability for their phone. My ex, we would have things and he would just take them off or find ways around them. And I've learned it's not healthy as the spouse for you to be that person that's like checking up, monitoring his phone. It's healthier for him to have a third part, you know, someone you both trust, that is kind of like the accountability partner for the phone. Like he has checks and, you know, he has a software, he has something, because that's like a huge obviously source for the pornography. So that was a big one, I think, just having some accountability around where he's accessing the pornography. Also, I'm trying to think, like, for me, for our marriage, it escalated into other things, acting out with physical people. And so I think knowing, like, we set boundaries in place, like if he went somewhere without me, like he would do a video call, or, you know, somewhere that you can have a check, like, you know, he's with who he's with. So, you know, video call check-ins, or if he was traveling, there were certain times he would call. We also, so I'm trying to think what else I had. Financial check-ins, if certain money was spent, you know, like cash, like he wasn't able to take cash out, or things around money, if money's being spent on those types of things. So just, and then another thing is having more weekly, like regular check-ins, like, because it's very, if you're with someone that's acting out a lot, and like it's hard to hear about it a lot, I guess. So you have to decide, but you really need, in my experience, I'm like, you really need to like have accountability that's regular. So you're on the same page, and it won't allow you not to avoid it. You know, so we had set up like weekly check-ins of like, and it was set time. So it's like, he knew when it wasn't, and he could be prepared for it. And then I could be prepared for it, and kind of those like weekly, daily, whatever works for you, but just those weekly that he's having that accountability of like, okay, because then when you have an addict, the goal, you know, you can't expect perfection, but you want progress. You know, are things happening less often than they are? And if they're not, then why? You know? And then another big thing for me was, if something happened, that he basically went through the process of, why did this happen? And how will I prevent this from happening next time? So it's like, you know, that he's taking accountability and making changes. You know, again, you don't expect perfection, but over time it should be getting better. And if it's not, then you'll know. And you'll know more quickly than I did when I just avoided it. So.
Well, thank you. There was definitely a lot of, in my experience, there was a lot of guilt, because you always hear about, well, you know, when you get married, it's you have to take responsibility to help get your spouse to the celestial kingdom, and that is a noble goal. But there's also, you know, after years and years of trying to do it the Lord's way, and then you're just so tired, and it really, there was a lot of guilt and shame, because I couldn't help him. But I really appreciated what was said in this Zoom call tonight, with the whole, it's not about you, it's about the Lord. The Lord is in charge of healing, and it's good to place those healthy boundaries to help protect you, you know. And I feel like I spent way too many years trying to do that, and it was really hard. But I'm just really grateful for like Celeste and all you guys on what you said. It's been very helpful, healing.
Well, that's good.
Awesome. Thanks
So
for
glad
your-
you're here tonight. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you, Jamie.
You know, Jason brought up an interesting point in the chat. You know, you get to a point where you're trying to help, but where does the line of I'm trying to help you get through this versus like, at some point they have to take responsibility, right? Like you could lock down their phone, lock down their computer, like manage their finances. And at some point you're literally just like in every aspect of their life, micromanaging everything. And that's no way to live either, right?
Oh, that's miserable. It's
Yeah.
miserable.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
couldn't imagine. I couldn't
And
imagine.
then you just find them in the closet with the Home and Garden magazine.
Right.
Keep those JC Penney
Like,
magazines
oh,
down
I
there.
didn't think about the Home and Garden.
Well, at the end of the day, they have to want to do it for them.
Yep.
If they're doing it for you, it's not going to stick.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if they want to do it for them, then you don't have to be in charge. It's them.
You know, you had mentioned before that you kind of felt like Heavenly Father was telling you, for whatever reason, like, keep going, stick with it, stick with it. And then there came a point where it's like, okay, now you can let go. And I know that feeling like very, very well. For like my marriage, it was like there were some boundaries and some things where it's like I felt like I still needed to try. But once there was this threshold that came, and I was like, I even specifically remember saying the prayer, like, this is miserable. Like, I can't keep trying to put out these fires and keep like digging, you know, around this to try and hedge up any sort of problems that are coming. Like, I just felt like I was chasing my tail. And I just remember Heavenly Father being like, it's okay to let go. And once I said that just in prayer, it's like everything just sort of fell apart, you know, like it was held together. And I have these moments where I can attest, and there were like miraculous things that like would happen. And I know, and I remember praying, like, I know your hand is in this right now, because I could have never pulled off what just happened. Then that was him saying, how many more band-aids do you want to keep doing here? You know?
Yeah.
And when I was ready, and when everything was ready, he's like, are you ready to let go? Are we ready to move on now? And that's when kind of things happen. So I really appreciate you being willing to kind of open up about this and share. I think it's healthy because I think a lot of other people have been down this road. And unfortunately, I feel like people don't really address it, or they feel alone in it maybe. And so that kind of comes out in a toxic way on a lot of the Facebook posts, a lot of the even memes and things like that. And what ends up happening all too often, I'm almost positive you've seen it if you've been in any of the Facebook groups for any length of time, it kind of turns into the battle of the sexes, right? Like these little pot shots at men or women, like, well, if only men would just honor their priesthood, then marriages would totally work out all the time. Like, that's this all-encompassing thing saying men are bad. And if they would just step up to the plate, everything would be fine because women don't ever have any of the problems. But then, men do the same thing for women. Like if they weren't just in it for like the money and trying to take child support, then things would work out. So I think being able to talk about it and recognize our own problems is extremely healthy and helps us get to a point where we're like, okay, I'm not here to blame the other person. I'm here to just simply move forward in a healthy way with somebody else who's also ready to move forward in a healthy way.
Yeah, for sure.
So
Well, and I think so many people struggle with pornography addiction. And I think there is this stigma around it. And I'm like, it is such a problem of the world, and it doesn't mean anything about you. Like that's the thing. I'm just like, there are so many amazing people that struggle. We all struggle with different things. And anyone that struggles with it, I'm like, it is a really hard thing to deal with, but you can overcome it. And I just feel like it broke my heart to watch my ex. Like I feel like Satan was just like holding on to him so hard, and it breaks my heart that so many people struggle with that, because it's like Satan's greatest tool, I feel like, in our society to destroy families and bring people down. But I'm like, there's great hope from it. Like it doesn't have to take you down.
Yeah,
that's true. That's true. But it does take down many. I actually have a question from the audience. He doesn't have a mic, so he can't give it. So you may have touched on this, but he kind of joined a little later. So he's just questioning, with these struggles that you had with your divorce and with your ex, how did that affect you emotionally? And what type of walls did that create within you that maybe you've had to kind of knock down?
I think honestly, the hardest thing I dealt with, I feel so blessed. Like when I talk to other women, because I'm like, I really didn't like feel like I wasn't enough. Like I knew it wasn't about me. I feel like it didn't like destroy my self-worth or whatever. But I think the hardest thing is it made me question. It's like I didn't trust myself anymore. And that was like the worst place I've ever been in. Like when I was going through, he was going through rehab, I was setting boundaries, and it was like I was in therapy just looking at my therapist like I had felt a certain way and she's telling me differently, and I just was like, I have no idea. If I can't trust myself and trust that God's telling me something, like what do I have?
Right.
It's like and that was probably like one of the hardest things for me, to just learn to like trust myself again, like, and just be like, it's okay, like that this happened. And maybe I was a doormat, maybe I like maybe there's things I could have done better, but just to get to that place emotionally where I was like strong enough to just trust myself. And I don't know, and I had so many cool experiences through. I always like felt God's love for me. Like I had like, there was like twice I was at church, and randomly after, a member of the stake president just like came to me and was like, hey, I need to talk to you. And he's like, I saw you walk in, and I just have to let you know that God loves you so much. Like I had so many cool experiences like that through this. Like I was going through so many hard things, but I felt God's love so strongly. And I just feel like that carried me through, because I was taking care of kids, I was running a business, like I just was like in survival mode.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers the
That's
question.
Yeah, I think it is. And survival mode is hard.
Yeah.
I think we all get there. And you just feel like it's a day-to-day or hour-to-hour process. It's tough, especially when you're a mom and you got kids to deal with, or maybe if you work outside the home, you have to deal with a job and all that demand. I mean, it's tough. So it sounds like you did a pretty good job of it, though. Like,
I'm still
yeah,
here.
yeah, you're strong. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I don't think we have any other questions.
No other questions from the audience?
Not yet.
So Brooke, I guess one of the things that that's always kind of beneficial, and well, looks like Skip raised his hand. We'll get to that in just a second. When you've got somebody else, because guaranteed on these groups there are other people that have been down the exact same road you've been down. What would be your advice to somebody who's just like, maybe they're still married and they just found out about this, or they're kind of trying to do like you did, right? Like they're putting the blockers on the computer, they're checking the finances, they're watching their phone, and they're just running through all these hoops. And they're like, it just doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Every time you put out a fire somewhere else, another one pops up, and they're just kind of skirting around it over and over again. What kind of advice would you give to somebody in that situation?
I think I've had multiple friends actually now that, as I am open about my divorce, I'm like, it's amazing that people, there is so many people that will reach out. And one thing I always say, it's okay to give yourself permission to leave. It's okay. God wants you to be happy, and you have to give yourself that permission. But at the same token, I always tell people, if I just love the advice my bishop gave me. He was just like, just make sure you're 100% sure before you make that choice, because I have a great friend that she's going through a similar thing, and we've talked, and I said, and for me, I know like I needed that like peace of mind 100%. Like, no, I gave it my all so I could walk away, like feeling that peace of mind. And I'm like, you're already married. It's like, if you think there's any chance of saving it, then do all you can to do that. Like, give it your all, so that if it is time to go, like you won't question that, because it's hard. It's hard even after everything. I'm like, it's hard to choose divorce and see your kids go through that. And it's like, if I hadn't given it that last year, I think, and gotten to that place, like I think it would have been a lot harder to like look back and be like, well, maybe like, oh, my kids are struggling. Like, you just make sure you're 100% sure, and God will tell you that, but give yourself permission to leave, because it's okay.
I like that.
Thank you. So Skip, I think he's up next.
All right, Skip. Come on.
Okay, I'm not turning on my video because I'm in bed, but
Nice.
Wait, that's never stopped you before, Skip.
I know. I'm like, that's never stopped.
You're always in bed.
well, at least I'm not eating ice cream in bed tonight.
That's true.
So I was curious and maybe you answered this, but was the marriage bad besides the pornography? I mean, you seem like you were extremely forgiving and willing to work with him, and yet it also seems like the pornography addiction was the thing that was the final straw in the divorce. So I guess my question is, like, why, if you're so forgiving, was he just not willing to work on it, or what happened?
Yeah. So, I mean, our relationship got to the point where it was more of like felt like I was his mom, like I was doing everything. So that was hard. But ultimately it was just, once I set boundaries of, these are things I'm not okay with in my marriage, like certain behaviors that he was doing. And once he did that, it was just, I had to walk away, because it was either, I was basically backed into a corner. It's either, okay, well, I said I'm going to leave, so if I don't leave, I'm okay with these behaviors that he's going to continue to do, or I get to leave. So ultimately it was those like the infidelity that was the final straw, just because I wasn't okay with that. It wasn't a marriage to me.
So infidelity, like he cheated on you then?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. That's all right. I get that. So is Braithwaite your married name or maiden name?
Married.
Oh, so are you related to a Wes Braithwaite, like brother-in-law?
Wes? No, not close. I don't know him.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, hey, thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for your question, Skip.
So, Brooke, that kind of brings up another interesting question. Do you think if you had set the boundaries earlier, that you might have ended it earlier in your marriage?
Yes. 100%.
Okay.
So, although I'm like timing's everything, like, I mean, I believe my kids are supposed to be here, so, who knows?
Yeah.
But I for sure think had I set them earlier, he either would have not escalated to what, infidelity, or it would have ended sooner. So,
Yeah, I agree. I think that at least looking back on mine, and I know I just touched on this a little while ago, but um, timing definitely played a role in it. And I, after this is all said and done, and I can say, hey, Heavenly Father, what was up with that timing? Because I was in a marriage for like over 6 years. It was just hard, but it wasn't right until the end to get out. And so there is timing and there is reasoning. I'm curious. Someday I'm going to figure it out. Right now, I don't know. Okay, so I see we have a couple more hands, so I'll be quiet and we'll go to Jason first. Jason, come on, bud. You're up.
Okay, I think I figured out the mic. Camera won't
Good.
come on.
Oh,
Anyways, one of the things I think is being missed here is it doesn't matter what she did um, until he makes a decision and takes responsibility for what he's doing. That is something that definitely has to be done. That's something that I had to do. Now, I wasn't active in the church when I was married to my ex-wife, and she kind of joined the church kind of half-heartedly. Our marriage was so toxic that even when I would go to church, there was just no way I could feel anything. I was cold. I was dead inside. And as things got worse and I started feeling like I was drowning and had to get out, I had to take responsibility for the fact that I was making the choice to stay in this toxic relationship. And so, in correlation to her ex-husband, he just never came to the realization that what he was doing was wrong and that he needed to take responsibility for it and change it. So it doesn't matter what she did or didn't do, it wasn't going to change anything until he made the choice to change it himself. And that's something that so many people I don't think understand. And we've talked about people in the groups and how just some people just don't seem to get it. They don't seem to understand that they haven't taken responsibility for their part in whatever landed them in a divorce and being single. And so if you never take responsibility, you're never going to grow. I mean, we're all here to learn things. People come in and out of our lives to teach us things as well as learn from us. But if you're not open to taking responsibility, you're never going to learn anything. And that was just something that, that I felt like needed to be kind of brought up. I mean, I've watched a couple of these podcasts, and that's just a part of the equation that's not being addressed, is personal accountability, responsibility, and then making a choice to make a change. Because Heavenly Father isn't going to change anything for you unless you make a choice and ask for the help through your prayer, through your faith, to make changes within yourself.
right. Right. I think, and I don't know, Brooke, yours might be a different situation. I don't know if everyone here might have a different situation, but
Oh, completely.
even though I know we or she or whoever couldn't change the choices of our spouses, ex-spouses, because it is up to them 100%. I think there's a part where we have to try to feel like we've done all we can. If I would have just sat back and just been like, I can't do anything about this. I'm just going to sit and ride this out. I don't know. I don't think I could stand before Christ and be like, hey, I did everything I could. Whereas now I feel like, even though I know I didn't have control over him and I couldn't change his choices, still gave it everything I had to hopefully convince him to do something different than what he was doing. So yes,
Right.
right.
And
He
you know,
has they
oh,
have
go
the
ahead.
control.
Sorry.
I was just saying they have the control, but we, even though we don't have control, might feel the need to exert as much as we can toward trying to help, even if it
Right.
does. Yeah.
No, and I understand that too. And like that has been discussed, you eventually come to that point where you understand I've done everything that I can do. I can't take this anymore. It's crushing me. It's killing me inside, what have you. And, and at that point you have to walk away. And with my situation, it took my middle daughter who, when my ex and I were in a heated argument, we didn't know that she was upstairs. She comes blowing out of her bedroom door and starts yelling at me the same way her mother yells at me, and that crushed me. And it was like in the coming weeks after that I'm out on the road doing my job, and I'm thinking, it's like, you know what am I doing? I am not being a good example to my daughters. I have 3 daughters with her. They're going to grow up, they're going to get married or have boyfriends, and they're probably going to emulate their mother and their grandmother in how both, how their mother talked to me and how their grandmother talks to their grandfather. And these guys may not have the restraint that I do, to just not like, if a guy talked to me like that, it would be on there, it would be rolling around in the parking lot, type of thing. That's how bad it was, with the toxicity and the disrespect, and just, I guess it was narcissistic behavior on her part. The interesting thing is since we've broken up, and we've become kind of friendly again, we can talk about certain things. It's yeah, it's almost like she was the way she was so that I had to learn some lessons in my life, because she doesn't really show those traits anymore. And it kind of is like, okay, what's going on with this? It's like, that doesn't make any sense. It's like, but anyhow, that's just kind of an interesting observation from that.
That is
Great.
But again, I had to take responsibility for my part in putting up with the situation, and in my case, being a bad example to my daughters as to how I was allowing myself to be treated.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for coming on in your comments. We appreciate that.
Yeah.
Hey, no problem.
Thanks, Jason. Okay, Nick, you're next, buddy.
You're muted.
Oh, there we go. That little button always gets me. Brooke.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming out tonight. Really good information. I was kind of curious, and maybe you already touched on this, but I was curious with the culture, and you did mention the fact that it's not so much a cultural thing as much as it is a worldwide thing of porn addictions. Many men are involved in it. Many have had a run-in with it, a brush-in with it. How do you see yourself moving forward with your experience that you have now versus how you're going to be dating in the future, knowing that, let's just throw out a random number of maybe 75% of men have been either addicted or exposed to pornography in a unhealthy way?
I think for me, it's just all about honesty and openness. I don't like, I know that I'm a realist.
Okay, so you're not on the boat of, okay, I've been through this, I'm never gonna go through this again. I never want to date a man that's ever seen a pair of boobies that haven't been on the screen or something like that.
I feel like that person doesn't exist or they're lying.
Very good.
For me, I would rather someone that can be open and honest, and just because, like I said, no one's perfect, and so yeah, to me, it's just about that honesty and openness and where their heart's at and how they're dealing with it and where they want to go with it.
Yeah. So great question. Sorry, go ahead. It looks like you had more.
No, that was my main question, because I've seen a lot of people actually go down that path of I got burned by fire. I'm never gonna go around fire again.
Well, and I think that would be someone's choice, though, right? Like maybe she would be like, dude, I just can't I can't do that anymore.
Right. And so my
yeah.
point on that is the fact that the majority of men, I mean, I'm not a voyeur, so I don't like watching sports, let alone pornography. So I mean, that's just the way that I'm built. But a lot of guys, they're driven that direction, and so to say one or the other, I'm just going to avoid this for the rest of my life. I was just kind of curious where you felt in that.
Yeah.
So
I just believe
awesome.
anyone, I'm like, it's all about their heart and their goals, and not about where they've been, but where they're going,
Well, just remember, those who thus protest too much, that old saying, like guys who come out and go, oh, porn, it's the worst thing ever. I would never, ever, ever. Oh my gosh. And you're like, oh, really?
yeah.
Thus protest too much, my friend.
Right.
Yeah, I agree.
It does bring up an interesting question, though, along those lines. Now that you've kind of gone down that road, how are your feelings of just being intimate again in a relationship? Do you have still some of those feelings of maybe inadequacy or like hesitation? Should you get into another marriage? Is that something that you're like, it feels a little tainted now?
I feel like I was cheated out of like what I want. I want a relationship where I'm that like exclusive source of sex and intimacy, and I feel like I was cheated out of that. And that's what I want. It doesn't scare me, I just know that's what I want, and I think it'll be amazing when I find it.
I'm getting a hint that you're not necessarily shy when it comes to the intimacy department in a marriage. You're not like, okay,
No.
well, we just want to have kids.
I miss it.
For procreation, not recreation.
Right. Well, you know what they say, practice makes perfect. So when you're having those kids, you want them to be perfect. Just make sure you practice a lot beforehand. So.
I don't need any more kids, though.
Yeah, you're at recreation, not
exactly.
Recreation stage.
Exactly. No more kids.
Right.
Well, I hope you end up finding that. I hope you find someone that's just as spectacular as you. I can tell you've got super strong testimony and a really good grasp of the atonement and what it can do in your life and the lives of those around you. So I hope you find someone that's just as amazing as you are.
Thanks. Me too.
Yeah. Well, Brooke, lastly, as we kind of wrap up here, I really appreciate you coming on tonight and just being open with these topics. I know pornography and just these red flags that we kind of run into, they're very sensitive topics to a lot of people. Some people, it sort of hits close to home. Some people have experienced it, or maybe they've gone through that themselves. Or some people have other red flags that kind of, trigger the same sort of emotional response, whether it's being cheated on or just having emotional affairs, whatever that might look like. But being able to discuss it in a healthy way, I think, is just a very good way to show I'm ready to kind of move forward with this. I'm not afraid to run from the issue. I will tackle it. I will address it. I will work through it with the atonement and come out on the other end a better person. And that's really, at the end of the day, all you can do, right?
Yeah.
So, just lastly, have you had any chances? I mean, obviously, you're not real long on the dating scene, but have you had any dates or have you been through anything that since
So
you've been divorced?
yeah, the first guy I dated for a few months. It was interesting because he was more interested in my business than I think me.
Ah,
So that was a challenge. And
Was he looking
but
for a
again,
sugar mama?
I'm learning that I'm smart. I can pick up on these things now. I have more wisdom. And I was able to walk away, and he was disrespect. Like, it was really good though, like, for me to see, like, I think I just coming from my marriage, I think my biggest fear is getting into a similar relationship. Like, I don't want to get another toxic relationship. And I think the dating experiences I've had, it's been like, oh, okay, like, I got this, like, I can stand up for myself, like, I'm not dumb, like. And so that was a good experience. And so
so what are you looking for then? If there's a guy that's watching this or listening in, tell him what would be your kind of guy that fits your mold.
I mean, for me, I just want that, like, I'm a very, like, I love deep. I'm like, I love with all my heart. And I'm like, I want someone that's just open, honest, vulnerable, that's just real. I just want, like, that genuine connection, that best friend that I can just be myself. And um, someone that's equally yoked. I provide for myself. I have my business. I have a great life. I don't need someone to come and take care of me. I want that companionship, and just someone that wants to, like, adventure with me. And, like, also that's a good example to my kids, because for me, respect is huge. Someone that just, like, loves and respects me, and shows my boys, I have 4 boys, that of how a healthy relationship is. And I feel like relationships are hard, but it should be fun. And, like, I'm a loyal, like, I'll fight to the death. And I just want someone that's the same, that will, like, that fight for me and for the relationship.
This is kind of an interesting thing because we've run into lots of girls, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Celeste and Corey, but I would imagine that probably the one thing we've heard the most is that when girls are looking for guys, deep conversations and that, like, someone that can be intellectually stimulating, we probably hear that more than, like, I really want a guy that's handsome. That's
That's true.
kind of like a
That's
big
true.
thing.
I think if a man can have a conversation about just anything, I mean, having a deep doctrinal conversation about something you heard at church and you want to talk about it some more, and being able to have that intellectual conversation about, like, well, what do you think about this, and what are your thoughts, and I think this. And I think women really, really do like that, rather than, it's okay, I'm going to turn the game on now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Absolutely. Communication is key. That's me. Like, I love communication. And so there have been a lot of females that have been like, we just need that. And maybe that's just a female thing. Like, maybe guys don't need that as much, but I feel like we need to be heard and we need to listen. Like, we just need that kind of bond that comes with communication. And maybe we feel better understood that way. I don't know what it is, but yeah, it's definitely something that's important to us women, I think.
Yeah, I think just being heard, for
Yep,
sure.
being
And
heard.
seen. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
We don't need you to fix all of our problems.
You
Just be
don't need
there.
pictures.
You're
Just
gonna have a
listen.
hard time with that. That's kind of ingrained in guys' DNAs. Like we need to learn
Unless
to
we
shut up
ask.
sometimes.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
kind of like,
we'll pretend we
yeah,
have
if you say,
problems.
I have a problem, guys, like, I'm here to fix it. I'm here to fix
Yeah.
it.
I'll do
Exactly.
it.
Right.
It's like, I just need you to listen. I
It's
don't need you to
it's
fix
just
it.
weird. I have to control that. Like if somebody's complaining, like a girl complains to me, I just have to go, I hear you. I hear you. Yeah, that sucks. And every
That must be
part of my
so
being wants
hard.
to go, I've got the best piece of advice. They'll fix that. I'm like, oh, they don't want to hear that.
No, we'll ask for advice if we need it. That's how.
Yeah,
we
what
do
is
it.
your advice? And the guy's like, oh, goody, goody, goody,
Thank
goody.
you.
Yeah. Sometimes I just kind of wonder because I've had like an ex that just keeps going like for hours, just complaining. And at some point you're like, I just want to fix this to make it stop, you know? Like, are guys really like fixers or are they just like, this is how I can get it to like stop? So,
Well, there's that too, because it depends how the person's complaining. Because if it's like, my life is sucks and everybody hates me, and then you're just like, how do I make this stop? So then you get the tools out, like make it stop.
yeah.
Just reflect what you're hearing, Corey, and they'll stop.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing you say is,
What I hear
I
you
feel
saying
your
is you feel like
pain.
crap
I
right now.
totally
No
get
one
it.
likes you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Your best friend was being a total jerk.
That's all they
Yeah,
need. And they're like, yeah, okay, all right. And then they're fine.
and then they'll stop talking
Yeah,
about it
and they'll
because
stop.
I'll be like,
that's
oh.
the key.
That's
Right.
the key. Reflecting.
Reflect. The faster you reflect, the faster it's over.
That's right. Just keep reflecting it back and back and
Oh,
back.
you're kidding me. I can't believe she did that. That's a horrible thing.
Right. So now with your business, obviously you're mobile. I think you had mentioned that you're not stuck in Texas.
No, I'm not.
So are
That's
you
the best thing
open?
about it.
Are you open to relocate if you find the right guy then? Or are you just
Yeah, I could relocate. I have one move in me. That's what I'm like. My oldest is 15, so I'm like, I want some stability for them, for my kids, So,
yeah.
And like I said, I may move to Utah to be closer to my ex. I mean, I want my kids to have their dad. So where I can, that may be happening sooner than later, but.
Well, Texas will miss you. The DFW's area will not be the same.
Yeah, you may not be able to get back in once they become their own country.
That's
then.
right.
I know, that's
You'll
true. Do I
You'll have
really want to
restrictions
leave?
on
Back in.
immigration.
Texas is the place to be, seriously. If country goes to pot.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Come join us here.
Well, I want to thank you for coming on tonight. It's been great having you. Obviously, this is kind of one of those topics. We say this almost every time because these are deep issues that we like to discuss, and people have gone through serious things. And literally, we could probably have just a 10-hour conversation and still not get to the bottom of all of it, because there's just so much that goes into our lives and into these things that have caused these issues. And we want to make sure that when we get to a point in our life that we are, healing, that we properly address them. And to do that, that's not just a 10-minute conversation. How many times do we go to the counselor or the therapist and sit there over and over and over and over again? Because it takes a long time to heal from these things. And there's a lot that goes into it, lots to unpack. So I want to thank you for coming on and just being open and sharing with us. So this
Happy
is
to be here. Thank you.
yeah.
Thanks, Brooke, you did good. Thanks.
Just to reiterate, for anybody that's here that's new tonight, please like us on Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel. All these videos will be posted up there, and share this with your friends if you found this valuable. We just really want to grow the show. And we have some really exciting guests coming up as well. We had Brooke tonight, but we have some lots of people lined up. So we've got people who are interested. And if you're interested in being on the hot seat, Celeste has an application. I think she posts it regularly on the groups, but if you would like to reach out to her privately, feel free to go and send her a chat and say, I'd like to be a guest on the show.
Yep, and it's also both on the Flameless Fireside page and the Flameless Fireside group. So
yes. So at this point, this is where we kind of stop the recording and open it up for everyone to turn on their microphones and their cameras if they so choose.